Today we're talking about Steamboat Willie. Let's get started. In March of 1928, Walt Disney went to New York to negotiate his contract with Charles Mintz as distributor. Charles Mintz had been distributing Disney's Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons and had been paying Disney about $2,250 per short. Walt was on his way to New York to try to renegotiate his contract to get an extra $250 per short. Walt was warned before he left by his animator of iWorks that Mintz had been approaching all of his animators and asking them to come work for him. But Walt didn't believe it. He didn't believe that he would be betrayed in that way by the people that he worked with and thought that he had good relationships with. But when he got to New York, he found out that Ub was correct. Mintz had indeed poached many of his animators, except for Ub and a couple of others, and was telling Walt that instead of paying him the extra that Walt was asking for, he would instead be reducing his salary to $1,800, and Walt would be effectively working for him. Well, Walt decided that he didn't want to lose control of any more of his creations, so he turned Mintz down and left, a little discouraged, to say the least. On the train ride home, Walt determined that he would never again lose ownership of anything that he created, and he brainstormed about where he should go from there. Now, the story of how Mickey Mouse came to be is a little shrouded in legend, to say the least. Walt would like to say that he got the inspiration for Mickey by a mouse that used to come visit him at his desk when he worked in Kansas City. But who knows if that's actually true? That could just be the Disneyfication of this history. But it sounds like Walt did have an idea for a mouse-type character on the train ride home, and that this new short that he had would have something to do with Charles Lindbergh and his airplane ride across the Atlantic. At the time, in 1928, Charles Lindbergh was very popular and had captured the imagination of the country. What does seem to be true is that by the time he got home, he did have the idea for a mouse, and of iWorks is the one who designed him, and Walt wanted to call him Mortimer, but his wife Lillian didn't like that name, and so they settled on Mickey, which sounded a little more friendly and approachable, and kind of an everyman type character. Steamboat Willie was actually not Mickey Mouse's first appearance in cartoons, at least not the first one produced. The first Mickey Mouse cartoons produced were Plain Crazy and The Gallopin' Gaucho, but they were produced as silent films, and Walt had a really hard time finding a distributor for them. So, still again discouraged, but determined to find his success, Walt decided that he needed a hook, something to get people excited about this new character, Mickey Mouse. Walt decided that he would capitalize on this increased interest in sound movies that had been sparked by the success of The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, that had premiered in 1927.
Blue days, all of them gone, nothing but blue skies from now on.
Walt sees sound as the hook that will get people interested in his new creation. The planning for Steamboat Willie started when they were still producing The Gallopin' Gaucho. It was inspired by a popular Buster Keaton movie called Steamboat Bill Jr., which is a movie about a young man who returns to his hometown from college and is reunited with his father, who he hadn't seen since he was a child, who is this big, gruff Steamboat Bill riverboat captain. Well, Buster Keaton is the son, and he's a misfit, and it's a really funny kind of fish out of water movie that is really worth the watch. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it, but you probably have seen a stunt from this movie where during a tornado sequence, the front of a building falls down essentially on top of Buster Keaton. He is saved only by an open window that, falls down around him. really. It's a death-defying stunt. One step in any direction or any mishap in the way the building fell would have at least ended his career and probably his life. The movie Steamboat Bill Jr. was actually inspired by a song called Steamboat Bill. Steamboat Bill is a song about a riverboat captain named Steamboat Bill who accepts a bet from a gambler from Kentucky, the steamboat race. One of the popular recordings of it is by Arthur Collins.
Down the Mississippi steamed the whippoorwill, commanded by that pilot, Mr. Steamboat Bill. The owners gave him orders on the strict QT to try and beat the record of the Robert E. Lee.
But during this race, they push the steamboats too hard, and Steamboat Bill's steamboat explodes. And as he and the gambler from Kentucky are soaring through the air, ready to meet their deaths, Bill bets the gambler from Kentucky that he'll get higher in heaven than he is.
The boiler, it exploded, blew them up in the air. The gambler said to Billy as they left the wreck, I don't know where we're going, but we're neck and neck. Says Bill to the gambler, tell you what I'll do. I'll bet another 1,000, I'll go higher than you. Oh.
So it's a funny song. You do hear the song Steamboat Bill in the animated short Steamboat Willie. That's the song that opens up with the steamboat on the river. And it's a song that Mickey Mouse is whistling. As Walt and his studio were preparing to create Steamboat Willie, they had to figure out how they were going to synchronize the sound with the movie. Now, at this time, they animated everything first, and then they were going to record the sound to go along with it.
Picture. No, in the days of Steamboat Willie, it was picture first. And then we used to put the sound on afterwards, and in those days you couldn't do what we call dubbing today, where you could mix a lot of tracks.
One of Walt's animators, Wilfred Jackson, had a mother who was a piano teacher, and so he brought in one day a metronome, and they figured out how they could time the music with the metronome to the frames of film so that they could know where to animate everything and where the sounds would fall. And they tested this by projecting the film up in the studio on a sheet and having the wives watch while Walt and his crew behind the curtain performed the music and the sound effects, along with what was being projected. After a while, Walt came out from behind the sheet and watched everything, and it looked like it was going to work. So from there, he decided to set off to New York to record his music. On his way out to New York, he stopped by Kansas City to visit an old friend, Carl Stalling, who had been an organist in the silent movie theater. Now, you may recognize the name Carl Stalling. He went on to work for Warner Brothers and was the composer for most of the songs in Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes cartoons. You probably will have seen his name on the opening credits for those. This goes to show you that a lot of the people who worked in the animation industry got their start with Walt Disney. Once Walt was in New York, he looked around for a technology to use to synchronize his sound on his film. There were a lot of technologies out there competing for business for people to make sound movies with. The Jazz Singer was made possible by having a separate recording that would play with the film. And so when they would be played together, if there was any loss in synchronization, then it would really ruin the movie experience. So Walt decided that wasn't for him. One of the technologies was the sound on film, and one of the companies that provided that was RCA. RCA had just recently produced the Terry Toons cartoons, Aesop's Fable, but Walt was not impressed by this. He thought that it was terrible, that it was just a lot of noise and nothing else. The thing about this cartoon is that it is just sound. It was just the music recorded on the film. There isn't really any synchronization. It might as well have just been an orchestra playing along with the film as it was shown in the theater. He landed on a technology by Pat Powers, who was actually kind of a shady character. He used a technology that he called Cinephone, which was probably bootlegged technology from other people. And so there's a lot that can be said about Pat Powers, and maybe there'll be a video on him coming soon. So Walt hired an orchestra and sound effects people, and they got together to record the sound effects and the music for the film. But the orchestra and the sound effects people could not get in sync with what was being shown, and the first day of production was ruined. So again, discouraged but determined, Walt contacted his brother Roy and told Roy to sell his prized possession, his Moon Roadster. He sold it for $500, and using that money, he hired the orchestra and the sound effects people for an additional day. But before they recorded, Walt drew a bouncing ball on the frames of the film that would bounce up and down, and that was how the orchestra were able to figure out how to keep time with what was being shown on the film.
We used to have to do everything at one time, and we used to have to run the cartoon. We'd have the fellows with the sound effects, we had the people with the voices, we had the orchestra going, and everybody had to synchronize and hit that thing right on the button. And we had a way of doing it, though. We had a little kind of a little beat that worked up and down, and there was so many of those beats, and they were all musicians working for me, so they could follow those beats. And when it came to a certain number of beats, they would go ah, or they would go bang, or they would go this, or they would pop one of these pop guns, and they would always fit.
They ended up recording it all in one take. There wasn't any mixing or sound editing in those days that they could do. And so it was all just one take as recorded. And Walt did all of the voice effects for this movie, as you can hear when you hear Pete, when you hear Mickey, if you hear Minnie, that's all Walt. With the sound recorded, Walt starts the process of trying to find a distributor. But they are still a little leery of taking a chance on something new. Walt shares his frustration with Harry Reichenbach, who is the manager of the Colony Theater. He has a background in show business. He tells Walt that these people don't know what's good until the public tells them. So he makes a deal with Walt to show Steamboat Willie in the Colony Theater for 2 weeks, paying him a total of $1,000 for the showing. Steamboat Willie opened in the Colony Theater on November 18th, 1928. It played with the sound film Gang War along with a stage show, and it was a huge success. It received more attention than the feature that it played with, Gang War. After the success of Steamboat Willie, Walt began to be contacted by a lot of distributors hoping to be able to distribute the film themselves. But he ends up going with Pat Powers, who had provided the Cinephone technology for getting the sound on the film. That ends up not being as good a deal as Walt thought it was, but he was a little naive too, actually, at the time. Steamboat Willie put Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse on the map, and then later, Plain Crazy, Galloping Gaucho, and then The Barn Dance also received success in the theaters. Videos on all of those coming soon. The story for Steamboat Willie is pretty thin. It starts out with Mickey Mouse on the deck of the boat whistling the tune Steamboat Bill as he's driving the steamboat on the river. Then in comes Pete, his nemesis, who ejects him from the bridge, and then he goes down and is taunted by a parrot. But who can understand what the parrot's saying? He says something, and then Mickey throws the water bucket on his head. And you can't understand what he says there. There he says, "Help, help, man overboard." But he says something to Mickey that I've never been able to understand. But I figured it out. The answer to what the parrot is saying is still to come. The rest of the story is simply Mickey loading livestock on the boat. His love interest, Minnie, gets left behind. He ends up loading her onto the boat using the hook and crane from the boat, lifting her up by her bloomers and putting her on the boat. And then, comically, the hook puts down her dress for modesty. Minnie's bloomers are the subject of a lot of humor in a lot of these early shorts. From then on, it's just a musical jamboree where Mickey does all sorts of things to animals to create this music, to the song, the Turkey and the Straw. It might not be as cruel what he's doing to the animals if you just think of the barnyard humor that Walt and his crew would have grown up with through their childhood. And so, pretty crazy, but there it is. It was synchronized music to sound, and it thrilled the audience to no end. After a little bit of partying on the deck, Pete again interrupts the fun and throws Mickey down below decks to peel potatoes. While he's down there, the parrot shows up again and does the same unintelligible taunt to Mickey. But what is the parrot saying? Well, by all accounts, what the parrot is saying was inspired by a popular song of the time by the singer Ida Cox called Worn Down Daddy Blues. In that song, Ida sings, "I'm through with you, and I hope you don't feel hurt."
'Cause I'm through with you, and I hope you don't feel hurt.
So, what is the parrot saying? He's saying, "I hope you don't feel hurt, big boy. Ha 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 ha." So, that's it. Let me play it again for you and see if you can hear it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this journey through the history of Steamboat Willie, and if you did, and you'd like to see more like this, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. So, since Steamboat Willie is now in the public domain, why don't you click here and watch it and see all of this glorious 1928 animated goodness for yourself.